I'm going to let him take it away, and he's got lots of stuff to say, and very interesting guy, so excited to have you here, man.
Thank you. If you don't mind grabbing the book from the outside, actually.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah. Awesome. And we'll get, if we can get the lights off of, actually, the one is fine for now.
Cool.
I'll just get that set.
Hey guys, so it's the end of the day, so I'm going to keep it fairly brief. I'm going to have a fairly casual chat here. I don't know if this is on yet.
It'll pop up in just
Fair
a minute
enough.
there, but.
So yeah, I've been in the blockchain space for about 6 years now. Elias Ahonen, as was mentioned, and I'm going to just talk about the then, now, and the tomorrow of cryptocurrency and kind of where we're headed on a macro scale. So just a little bit about me. Obviously, I wrote the Encyclopedia of Physical Bitcoins and Cryptocurrencies. That's how I got started in the space. Started in 2012, 2013. I published a book first in 2016. And what it is basically a book that talks about these physical coins. And through them it tells the history of Bitcoin and blockchain. So I look at the different symbolisms in these coins and tell the stories of the people that minted them, why they minted them, what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency meant to them, etc., etc. And it kind of gives a direct view into it. And kind of the thesis of the book is that these coins are a tangible artifact of the future. So here's the copy. I have a couple out front. I also actually have a nice collection of them out front, which is one of the bigger ones in the world. The one in the picture here is actually one of the most valuable coins in the world. It's 1,000 Bitcoins. It's not that much. There's a sticker on the other side, you can peel it, and if you peel it, there's a QR code or a private key to access the 1,000 BTC. So it's actually one of the most valuable coins in existence. So all of that stuff I do under a brand name, Crypto Numist. Token Valley is another project I've been working on. It's a startup where we're building a platform to evaluate cryptocurrencies, and we also do some cryptocurrency consulting, which we've done in different countries for a little over a year now. So without further on that, I would say that cryptocurrency fits into kind of three different eras, I would say. The first being the early days, which is 2011 to 2016. That was when most people hadn't heard about cryptocurrency. Most people didn't do it, if they had it, they thought it was a very sketchy thing. It wasn't really mainstream in any sense, even though towards the end of it, it became something that most people had heard about. So the way it really started, it was really just a very gimmicky experiment between a bunch of nerds on a forum. There was one forum that someone started. There was a Nakamoto guy there. No one knows who that was still, or if it was an individual or a company. But it was really just a very theoretical idea. And that was until one person essentially said that, hey, I'll give 10,000 Bitcoin to whoever gets the pizza delivered to my house. So someone ended up delivering a pizza to the guy's house in Florida, and he paid them 10,000 BTC, and that was the first time they had any kind of real value. And that was a very expensive pizza by today's standards, of course. And there's actually a coin that I have that commemorates that, which is kind of cool. But after that, you kind of had the first Bitcoin market start up. And those were IRC chat channels where you literally it was just a chat, and you would say, I have 100,000 Bitcoin, who wants it? I have 10,000 Bitcoin, who wants that? And it was very sketchy. It would be, when the first exchanges got started, it was basically, you would be wiring money or sending a check to Tokyo or whatever, and that's how you would get money into your Mt. Gox account, etc. So Mt. Gox was the first major exchange. Probably, who's all heard about that? How many had money in it?
Oh.
I had $1, so it was okay. But I saw it go down, and it was really a garage operation by one guy. And again, it was literally a card trading site that he pivoted into a Bitcoin trading site with terrible security. And then he ended up losing $800 million worth of Bitcoin.
Oh.
So it was a pretty big deal. And they've since recovered most of that, and they've had bankruptcy proceedings, and I also have a coin that commemorates that, which is also neat. After that fiasco, many people thought that Bitcoin was over, it was dead. Of course it wasn't. It's a good time to buy. And then after that, many new exchanges have popped up, and a lot of other exchanges have gotten hacked. Sometimes creators have just kind of walked away. There's lots of sketchy things that went on during this very tumultuous period. There wasn't much use for Bitcoin early on. Again, it was very much of a nerd, hobbyist kind of thing. But the thing that there was a use for was to buy illegal drugs on the darknet. I won't ask you to put your hands up if you've done that. And basically, there were these markets on the dark web where you could use Bitcoin to buy pretty much anything. And also online gambling was a big thing back then. And basically that was where it started. And again, many people figured that it's just over, it's going to pass, the government's going to ban it, it's going to be illegal. And that was around the $100 mark. And there was one of them, it was called Silk Road. It actually got shut down, and that's when a lot of people thought that it was over. And that's kind of when I actually became convinced that it's not over because it survived. So I remember sending my friends emails saying, buy Bitcoin now, it survived this, it's going to survive a lot longer. This was around like 80 bucks or so. So then we had Ethereum come up, started by Vitalik, and it was the first real ICO. And regrettably, I missed that one. But that was the first time there were new coins, and there were several other ones as well. One of the ones that I invested in during this period was called NEM. And it was the sketchiest thing. Like it was basically a forum, and I was on the Dogecoin subreddit. And someone links this thing, like they're saying that there's a new cryptocurrency out today, go check it out. So I went to check it out. I'm just going to put this down. I don't know if you can hear me or not. No.
I can clip it in for sure next.
There we go. It's just awkward holding it. So, so basically, there's this forum and someone says, go check this out, and I go look at it, and it's literally one guy who's written this like 3 or 4 paragraph thing saying, I'm gonna raise like $30,000 to make a new cryptocurrency and hire a developer, and everyone who gives me a bit of money gets a little portion of it. And the idea is that everyone gets an equal share. It was really sketchy, like the sketchiest thing you can imagine. And I sent him $15. And I was like, I'm never gonna see that money again, but whatever. And a year after, they launched it as the New Economy Movement. And my $15 had become about $4,000. And then over the next half year, I tracked it. And there were a lot of people talking about it on the forum, but really the price kept going down. So about $3,000 for my stash. I was on Poloniex, and it was June 28th, 2015. I sold it all for $3 grand. So still, I made like pretty good returns, but if I had held to the bubble, it would have been worth over $10 million.
Whoa.
That was the biggest performer in 2000.
Yeah. So I had 7.5 million net coins, and they peaked at around $1.20 US. So point is, it was like an insane time when there were insane opportunities to be had, and there were very few people to take them, and anyone that got into space could essentially put themselves there. So eventually, with the Silk Road being taken down, they actually seized a huge amount of Bitcoin. The US government, hundreds of thousands, if I recall. And what ended up happening was that the US Marshal Service auctioned off these Bitcoins. And that was really the first time there was a government acknowledgement that Bitcoin was valuable and it was legal. And that was a big deal in the grand scheme of things, because, well, if the US government is selling it to citizens, then there's obviously nothing wrong with it. And that quashed a lot of the ideas that they're going to make it illegal, they're going to imprison people using Bitcoin, etc., because that was all going around the ether at the time. And at one point, we went into a bear market, obviously. Crypto went up to about 1,200 US, December 2013, if I remember, 24th, I don't remember. But after that, there was a 2-year bear market, and it went from 1,200 down to about 250, 300. And that's, again, when most people at the time just dropped it. They sold at a loss, or they sold at a slight gain, and they just mostly sold out of it, and this isn't for us. You know, this was fun, the game's over. And a small minority of people, I would say maybe 15, 20% of the people involved, they kind of stayed through that 2-year period. And they saw the new highs that we had late last year and early this year. And I'm of course one of them. So that was a 2-year high. We had a peak of about 10 billion US at the beginning of the recent rally in May 2016. And I would say that, well yeah, that was May 2016. I would call that kind of the end of that period. Then it started going up a little bit more from that, and then by May 2017, we were in the next rally. So here's just kind of a few things from that time. I mentioned the Silk Road. That was the first place you could actually use Bitcoin. So that's what you could buy. This was a screenshot from long ago, so I would imagine it would be cheaper now. Those 2 pizzas there are the pizzas that sold for 10,000 Bitcoin. So they're the most expensive pizzas in the world. Mt. Gox, of course, being the exchange that crashed, we had Ethereum and NEM come up. And as far as culture, the first conferences started during that time. So there were some conventions like this, some bigger, some smaller, but there were very few. They were few and far between. There weren't 10 different major events around the world every week like there are now. So that was very much the early times. Today, I would say this started in May of 2017. So we had a big kind of rise, with first led by a bunch of ICOs and alternative coins, or non-Bitcoin coins, of course, and then Bitcoin followed with that, and we went all the way to, from the peak of 10 billion before to almost 800 billion US, and now we're going down again to about 200 billion. So we're following kind of the same pattern again. I just kind of guesstimated this period being 2017 and 2019. Could go longer, could go less, I'm not 100% sure. But I felt that this is kind of a transitory period between it being an obscure thing and between being a entrenched thing. And probably I would say that between those 2 things, I don't know if mainstream is the word or up and coming is the word or what, but what we've seen is huge amounts of new business, including mine, and everyone's here probably, mostly, have shown up during this time. And they've seen the opportunity and tried to capitalize it, some successfully, some not, and lots of exchanges. First you had really only a few, a couple in China, Asia, a couple in the US, 1 in Canada, and then it improved from there. First time I bought Bitcoin, it was, there was not really an exchange I could get into. So I ended up having to use PayPal with my credit card to buy like Second Life Linden dollars on some weird exchange. And then I used that to buy Bitcoin. And it was like a 20% loss in like 3 exchanges, and it was insane. It's a lot easier now, and now it seems that every little city has several exchanges, like Calgary, which is mind-blowing to me. And there's obviously a huge market for it. And the CEO of Binance, I was at the conference in Seoul a few months ago, and he said that they've got 10 million users now, and within a few years they expect to have 1.2 billion users. So obviously this is looking to be on the uptrend, and those exchanges are warranted. So then the thing that really pushed that bubble up, I think, was the whole ICO craze. You had a few projects that raised a lot of money using the ICO model. That's arguably dead now. A lot of people are saying it's done. I don't think it's done yet, but it's not what it was, and it won't be, I don't think. But we're going to see now STOs, asset-backed tokens, security tokens, airdrops became a thing, forks became a thing, where Bitcoin split into Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and then Bitcoin Gold, and who knows how many others. And those are all new models that came up during this period. Before that, it was really just Bitcoin Bitcoin and Ethereum and a couple handfuls of other coins that are mostly gone now. Global commentary, research, involvement, experiments by the government and by institutions worldwide have become a thing. Lots of governments are very openly investing in blockchain and cryptocurrencies even. The Dubai government saying that by 2020 they want their whole government to run on blockchain, whatever that means, I don't know. China is making huge investments into blockchain, and they have government-sponsored conferences, and just, I think they're going to be leaders in it in a lot of ways. I remember when Vitalik from Ethereum, he came into a meeting with Putin, and I was like, oh, well, it's real now. So that's what we're seeing kind of in this space, is everyone kind of perked up their ears, and they're like, this is serious now. You can't ignore this. This isn't some, you know, experiment. It's something that is an up-and-coming, legitimate thing. And again, the conference is sort of happening every week, so I'm heading to the LA Blockchain Investment Summit on Monday, and then Puerto Rico right after that, and we'll see where I go after that. So it's just constant, and you can't possibly keep up. Like Ken, I think he's been at, what, 36 events this year. So, you know, he's way ahead of most people. Some cities and countries have sort of become hubs. So what I've seen is that Seoul and Singapore and I would say Shenzhen in China, certain other cities in, I would say in North America, Toronto, Vancouver, Seattle, etc. They've kind of become the hubs for cryptocurrency. The companies tend to congregate there. I would say Calgary is number 3 or 4 or 5 in Canada. Toronto and Vancouver obviously ahead. As far as countries, we have seen certain small countries very openly take advantage, or at least try to capitalize on blockchain. So I know that Barbados, they have a brand new government a couple months ago, and they're saying that we want to basically make this a blockchain hub and bring as many blockchain companies as possible here. Malta did the same. They managed to get Binance over, and Gibraltar, and several others. I know Dubai is also doing the same thing to a degree. So we're seeing that and the reason I think that's happening is that, well, these governments have small economies, so they don't have a whole lot to lose. They don't have a global, huge reputation like the US, where they could lose legitimacy if they take a misstep. They also have very agile decision structures. It's, you know, a few people that are in power, and they can decide, hey, let's do this, and I think we'll do good with this. They have fewer kind of entrenched systems and bureaucracy, so they're more nimble. I would say Canada's much more nimble than the US in that regard, so we can act faster on, you know, different policies as well. But these really small islands and such are really the ones leading the charge here, and I think Canada's gonna definitely lag behind, but I would say still ahead of the US, because the bigger you are, the slower you move, basically. So yeah, we reached that peak then, and now we're on the downward spiral, you could say. If we're going down much lower, I don't know, but it's quite possible. And a lot of my contacts are saying that, you know, we could face another 1.5 years of this. So I think if you're a company in blockchain and you kind of want to survive, you have to have a plan for 2 years to face a decline in the industry. And if you survive that, then you definitely deserve to come out ahead at the end. As far as the community, we've seen this huge explosion of memes. It's become mainstream on the internet. It was, I mean, everyone knew about Bitcoin in 2016, but most people didn't know what it was. Now it's kind of become, you know, notorious on YouTube with different ICO guys going like, hey, 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 with the connect. So it's kind of, it's gotten that reputation, and there's all kinds of videos and crazy, you know, so many YouTubers coming out. We have CryptoKid over here as well. So we've definitely faced this kind of cultural explosion where it's become part of the common rhetoric. Lots of Netflix series, I know Black Mirror and some others are mentioning Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So it's kind of entered that sphere, and I think it has a much longer way to go there, but it's important to acknowledge. So for the future, I'm again guesstimating 2020 as kind of being from where the next stage begins, and I'm just going to call it a decade at that point. So at that point, I think that I'm just going to make very vague predictions because, well, it's hard to do anything else. But I think that companies, it's going to be essentially what happened with, well, I believe that cryptocurrency is essentially the internet of money. So it's like, it's the same thing that's happened to communications with the Facebooks and the WhatsApps and the MSN messengers and the Skypes of the world, and email even, is happening to the global monetary system. And whether that happens in a decentralized way or not, or whether it overthrows a current system or not, I don't know. But I think it's going to change the way things happen on a fundamental level. And I think that'll be accurate from both the back end and the front end to some degree. But I personally think it's going to be mostly the back end that gets changed. And I think as an example, I would use what happened with the gold standard. Was it 72? I don't know. 71. So basically, money used to be based on gold, right? And before that, after that, it was not based on gold. So pretty much overnight, the entire basis of the strongest currency in the world got changed. And that's a pretty major thing. But from the perspective of the average user, nothing ever changed. They still use the same dollars to buy their milk. They use their same bank accounts. They use their same checks to write money. Nothing really changed. You didn't have to learn anything new. And I think that for crypto to be successful in becoming a pillar of the new system, it's going to probably go like that for the most part. I don't think most people will have a huge level of direct interaction with crypto soon. And when it does, it will just happen naturally, where it gets pushed on them by the institutions that have those interests in mind. So I think that just like Facebook and Google and Apple and Facebook rose up in the last tech bubbles, I think we're going to see a large number of companies, whether exchanges and custody solutions and all kinds of other Bitcoin companies or crypto-related companies, and they're going to become huge behemoths in the industry and acquire more and more companies and kill the small ones, etc. So I think we're going to pretty much follow the same path there. I think a lot of existing businesses like banks, securities exchanges, remittance services, credit cards, insurance, that kind of thing, they're going to be disrupted quite a bit. And I think they have the opportunity to stay relevant if they innovate. But just like Kodak, which made film cameras, they didn't do too well when digital cameras came around. So I think we're going to see a lot of that happening as well. Governments, I think they're going to incorporate blockchain in various ways. Just like Dubai is trying to put their government on there, I think we could see land titles on the blockchain in different ways. It'll be very boring. Some of it will be very, very interesting, and some of it will be just extremely plain and bureaucratic, but they'll just replace their existing systems with newer technology. But facts are saying that we could face another 1.5 years of this. So I think if you're a company in blockchain and you kind of want to survive, you have to have a plan for 2 years to face a decline in the industry. And if you survive that, then you definitely deserve to come out ahead at the end. As far as the community, we've seen this huge explosion of memes. It's become mainstream on the internet. Everyone knew about Bitcoin in 2016, but most people didn't know what it was. Now it's kind of become, notorious on YouTube with different ICO guys going like, hey, 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 with the
Connect.
So it's gotten that reputation, and there's all kinds of videos and crazy, so many YouTubers coming out. We have Crypto Kid over here as well. So we've definitely faced this kind of cultural explosion where it's become part of the common rhetoric. Lots of Netflix series, I know Black Mirror and some others are mentioning Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So it's kind of entered that sphere, and I think it has a much, much longer way to go there, but it's important to acknowledge. So for the future, I'm again guesstimating 2020 as kind of being from where the next stage begins, and I'm just going to call it a decade at that point. So at that point, I think that I'm just going to make very vague predictions because, well, it's hard to do anything else. But I think that companies, it's going to be essentially what happened with, well, I believe that cryptocurrency is essentially the internet of money. So it's like, it's the same thing that's happened to communications with the Facebooks and the WhatsApps and the MSN messengers and Skypes of the world, and email even, is happening to the global monetary system. And whether that happens in a decentralized way or not, or whether it overthrows a current system or not, I don't know. But I think it's going to change the way things happen on a fundamental level. And I think that'll be accurate from both the back end and the front end to some degree. But I personally think it's going to be mostly the back end that gets changed. And I think as an example, I would use what happened with the gold standard. Was it 72? I don't know.
71.
71. So basically, money used to be based on gold, right? And before that, after that, it was not based on gold. So pretty much overnight, the entire basis of the strongest currency in the world got changed. And that's a pretty major thing. But from the perspective of the average user, nothing ever changed. They still use the same dollars to buy their milk. They use their same bank accounts. They use their same checks to write money. Nothing really changed. You didn't have to learn anything new. And I think that for crypto to be successful in becoming a pillar of the new system, it's going to probably go like that for the most part. I don't think most people will have a huge level of direct interaction with crypto soon. And when it does, it will just happen naturally, where it gets pushed on them by the institutions that have those interests in mind. So I think that just like Facebook and Google and Apple and Facebook rose up in the last tech bubbles, I think we're going to see a large number of companies, whether exchanges and custody solutions and all kinds of other Bitcoin companies or crypto-related companies, and they're going to become huge behemoths in the industry and acquire more and more companies and kill the small ones, etc. So I think we're going to pretty much follow the same path there. I think a lot of existing businesses like banks, securities exchanges, remittance services, credit cards, insurance, that kind of thing, they're going to be disrupted quite a bit. And I think they have the opportunity to stay relevant if they innovate. But just like Kodak, which made film cameras, they didn't do too well when digital cameras came around. So I think we're going to see a lot of that happening as well. Governments, I think they're going to incorporate blockchain in various ways. Just like Dubai is trying to put their government on there, I think we could see land titles on the blockchain in different ways. It'll be very boring. Some of it will be very, very interesting, and some of it will be just extremely plain and bureaucratic, but they'll just replace their existing systems with newer technology, but the same fundamentally. So I think that's kind of the direction it's going. But I do think it's going to become a critical pillar of pretty much everything in the future, in the same way that the internet is a critical pillar, the same way instant messaging is a critical pillar, email, etc. We can't function without satellites. I think we're pretty much going to have the same situation in 25, 15 years from now. So I think the big question that a lot of people discuss a lot is what is the idea behind cryptocurrency and where is it going? This is one of my coins, one of my favorites actually. It's got an imagery of a bunch of people using chains, obviously blockchains, to pull down a bank. And the bank is on fire and the bankers are there crying with their money, which is supposedly worthless now. And Bitcoin is the big savior there. So that was done in 2013 by someone, and that is obviously that person's vision of what blockchain is and what Bitcoin is and what it symbolizes and what it means to the people. Whereas the other example there is that same bank, but instead of being torn down, it's actually strengthened. And it's, instead of being backed by arguably an inferior system, it's backed by something that uses a different technological backing. So a lot of people will say that this is the ideal. A lot of other people will say that's the ideal. And I won't really take a side on the matter, but it'll be interesting to see where the next 15 or 20 years takes us. I think that's about it.
So we're gonna do some questions here. I love that. That was great. I've got lots of questions for you myself, but I'll try and share that a little bit with the audience too. I guess I'll just make a quick kind of comment and question for you, and then I'll pass it off to the audience here. Now, I just at the end there, you're talking about the future and possible outcomes and iterations of what could result from this. In the event that second outcome that I'm less inclined to be excited about happens, what do you feel will have been the step forward from the current system we have now, in comparison to the version that I would have preferred?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of people characterize Bitcoin as digital gold, and before currency and finance used to be based on gold, and then they decided that that's old-fashioned. Why? You put it under the ground, you dig it up again, and possibly for many other sinister reasons, decided that it wasn't a smart idea to base your currency on that. If you were to base currency on blockchain, it really is the same kind of idea. So I think I could see a financial crisis happening that, I'm very much speculating here. I don't want to go all conspiracy theorist on anyone, but if there was a crash that happened and cryptocurrency retained its value and became more valuable and became a store of wealth that people rushed to, I could see that even causing something that where currencies start being backed by crypto. I could see a situation, let's say there's a country that's kind of bankrupt and has a huge amount of debt, a small country, let's say in, Africa or South America or wherever. Theoretically, if they were to say that we're adopting Bitcoin as our national currency, and before that bought up all the Bitcoin they could, well, that would bring up Bitcoin's value so much that they would pay off all their debts. I could see that happening and it creating some sort of cascading effect. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at is in the instance where banks are still around and still relevant and offering their services, I guess what's the big leap forward? I guess I'm getting at what's the implication of reverting back to a gold, more or less like a gold standard, but this time digitally. What kind of things does that then prevent the types of failures that we've seen at the current banking system and financial sector? What's the improvement?
Well, it depends entirely on how that happens and what the nature of that change is. But I think if we look at the concept of why there are banks in the first place, let's use the example of the Wild West where gold was money, and people would get their gold robbed from them, and they would just put it in a central place in the town, and that would be insured, and they would keep it there. With Bitcoin, a lot of people will preach that you don't own your crypto unless you have the private key, and they'll say that over and over again. But unfortunately, the vast majority of people don't want to own their private key, and they're way too incompetent to actually do that. There's a reason they don't keep their money in the mattress. They don't keep their money in gold bars, buried somewhere. In the society we live in, we are trained to trust other groups to provide services, and a service can be to store money. I don't believe that. I think that a very, very small minority of people will ever be holding private keys to cryptocurrency. I think almost always they're going to be held by third parties. Now, whether those are third parties that are some new upstart that comes up and becomes big, or existing banks that people far and wide still actually do trust, and if they're smart, they're going to incorporate that into what they do.
Do you think having a finite asset backing more of the world's banks and I guess their loans and such, do you think that then
gets back to promoting responsible lending and does away with some of the irresponsibility that we saw in 2008 and previous bubbles. Do you think that mitigates any of that risk in that people really consider, well, should I make this loan because I can't just, type in a few keystrokes and inflate the currencies as applied to help pay off my mistakes?
I think yes and no. These major recessions and crashes, they always happen and they've always happened. And the human lifespan is quite short, and it tends to be that, once per lifetime there's some horrific crash. And, we don't really learn from our grandparents that much. I think that no matter what we do, it's going to go in waves, and I think it's a natural pattern. So I'm not going to say that this is going to, just like World War II didn't end all wars. I don't see this fixing everything, but I do think that it's a more sane system. I know someone commented on Reddit or something that, having cryptocurrency or Bitcoin as the backing of currency, well, finally, if aliens were to contact us, we wouldn't have to be embarrassed about our financial system anymore. So that's kind of my thinking there. I think it's a more sane system, but I don't pretend it's going to fix all of our problems.
Well, let's maybe grab some questions.
I have a question. We understand from business that you have reconciliation or consolidation of the companies, and the trend will come. So many companies will do whatever it is, and then big 3 or 4 will just If we borrow this idea to all these coins, like 1,600 or 1,600 coins, how do you foresee that maybe there is some movement where they get all of them into like 100 only or like 50, so it will be meaningful trade?
There's a few viewpoints on this. I personally think there's going to be millions of tokens. The reason I think that is that I think that pretty much every mid-cap stock, and even eventually the stock market, could all be transferred to tokens, essentially. It just, instead of having paper records on a central ledger at a stock exchange, it makes sense to have essentially a bearer instrument that you can transfer, even if that transfer happens between institutions. So I think that pretty much all equity could be a certain token. I wouldn't be surprised if every house gets tokenized eventually, and you can day trade your house or cross-section of the houses in your neighborhood. And that would cause for very interesting and exciting markets. So I think that there's going to be ridiculous amounts of tokens, but probably most of the tokens that we have today are probably not going to stick around.
Yeah, let's right here in the middle. Yeah.
Sure. It's just interesting to me how early you got into the space. What got you into crypto, and what's keeping you there now?
Well, I was in my background's in political science, and I've always kind of tried to be on the leading edge of things and kind of seeing what's happening next, where the world's going, what the next big trends are, and jump onto those. And that's kind of what my idea was in university. I'm going to study things and find what's exciting and get on that bandwagon. And I discovered crypto, and I thought that this is gonna overthrow a lot of systems that exist and gonna create a lot of opportunities. And because of that, there's much less of a barrier of entry at that point into that space. And I didn't have a technological background at the time, and I was disappointed by the space at the time because everything was discussions about computer science and etc., and it just wasn't relevant to me. I didn't feel that I belonged. So I discovered these coins, and having collected coins as a kid, I thought, well, these are cool, and I started buying up some and selling some, and then I was bored one summer, so I wrote an ebook, about 40 pages or so, and that got popular. Whenever people on eBay were selling and buying and selling these coins, they would link that ebook, and someone said, well, why don't you write a longer version of it? And I'm like, okay. At the time I thought it would take me 3 months and 100 pages, and 300 pages later and 2 years later I was done.
2 years.
Yeah, but I mean I took breaks and stuff in between. So that's what I did, and that got me kind of a footing into it, and I made a lot of contacts obviously, and then kind of in the next in phase 2 of my presentation, 2017, I thought, I got to do more than this. So I got together a team for a startup, and we've been building a pretty cool platform and helped some pretty cool projects. As for the future, well, I think that there's a hell of a way to go, and the contacts that I've made and the friends that I've made on the travels I've been on and all the stuff I've done, they're gonna all go on to do very interesting things, and I think a lot of other things would be very boring in comparison.
I came out to ask you some questions. I'm not letting you go away with a couple ones. What was that event you guys went to in Cancun all around Ethereum there? Tell us about some of the people you met there and just how that event was instrumental in your life, because I know it changed things for you a little bit. And then tell us about Burning Man and how that changed. Those two things important, okay? So Cancun and whatever that was, tell us about that. And then Burning Man, okay? And then we're gonna, right after this, so hang around, don't leave.
So Cancun, it was a trip. There was a consulting client that we went to.
What was it called?
It was called Oleum, and
No, the event.
the event. It was DevCon 3.
DevCon 3.
So it's Ethereum Developers Conference.
Yeah.
There are about 2,000 people there, and lots of the main people involved in that project and Bitcoin as well were there, and they were just discussing what was going on, and we were basically just helping that client with PR stuff, and it was the way these conferences go. It's a lot of partying, so it's like from 10 in the morning to 4 in the morning, basically. And my job would sometimes be to be at a nightclub and find all the nerdy looking guys and bring them to our VIP booth.
I knew you guys would love this. Keep going.
So that was pretty much that. That was about a week. These crypto conferences tend to be pretty crazy. I've been to, there was one in Korea where there was just the craziest pool party I've ever been to, and there's just billionaires there, that's kind of how it goes. It's a very young industry. It's a very non-traditional industry. You don't have very many old guys in suits. Like it's not a stuffy place at all. I think it'll change. I think we're seeing a lot more of the traditional industry coming in, but it's a very kind of high energy, play hard, work hard, play hard kind of culture, I would say. You mentioned Burning Man. I was just there this past and late August, and I don't know if you know what that is. It's basically this party in the desert with 70,000 people where they build
70,000?
70,000, yeah, where they built this entire city into the desert from nothing, and
all out of wood?
then they burn it essentially at the end. People bring RVs. You have to bring everything with you. You can't buy anything, but everything's free. There's bars everywhere that are free. There's no rules at all. You can do anything. Never sleeps. But it's pretty big in the crypto space. I was at a crypto camp actually. We had 90 people at the our camp.
If you guys want to do Burning Man next year, let's rally and let's do this. Seriously, let's do it. Okay. Back.
It's a lot to handle, Jan.
I'm down. I'm down.
I might crash after the first 2 days.
Never.
So fair enough. So my best story there actually. So we had our crypto camp there. We actually had an altar to Doge at our camp. It was very cringy, but it was a good time. Brock Pierce came to our camp, who invented or launched Tether and EOS. And we had a sauna at our camp, so I was just at the sauna. And he was speaking, and I just walked into his speech in my underwear, actually. And I just go there and I listen to his thing, and then I go and give him this book, and he loves it, and we go and kind of chat behind the tent, and we're just, this scene is like, it's the desert, and I'm sitting with this billionaire in my underwear on an old cardboard box inside a dumpster. It's not pretentious. Like, that wouldn't happen in New York. That wouldn't happen with the, CEO of some big hedge fund. It's a lot more laid back. It's a very different culture. And of course, there's cross sections in all of these. And then the next day, he picked me up in a pink fur there, and there were all these other people. There was 6 people in the golf cart, and they were all actual world level celebrities that I didn't think I would ever meet in real life, and I'm just like, is this real?
Pitch me, is this real?
Yeah, it was. So that's kind of a lot of these ideas behind cryptocurrency come from this kind of counterculture perspective.
Yeah, any more in the audience? Yes, go ahead.
So 2020, Bitcoin's halving. I forget, it's around the time of the election year. So it's a two-part question, or two questions actually. We're kind of in an uncharted territory since the last halving now with more serious cryptos coming out, like Ethereum, for example, right? What do you think is going to happen at the halving? And the second part of that question is, if Ethereum can launch their dApps and build their second layer systems, go to staking, and actually work, could it potentially ever overtake Bitcoin as the internet or whatever, the next version?
It's so I'll comment on Ethereum first. I'm not sure. I think Ethereum is awesome. It's a very solid contender for being around for a long time. I think the best way to follow things is look at where are the developers and where's the meat of the thing. Lots of people hype about all kinds of things, but what is actually consistently being worked on, even if there's no new news every week. I think Ethereum was one of those. I think that there's a few others that show a lot of promise, and a lot of the top 10 and top 20 I think have a lot of potential. Personally, I think that there's a chance EOS could compete with Ethereum quite a bit, but I'm not sure. I don't think that Ethereum will overtake crypto in Bitcoin and what Bitcoin does. And what Bitcoin does, I think it's kind of like a gold standard. I think of it as digital gold. I don't think of Bitcoin as a fancy thing that you do all kinds of fancy things with. I don't think Bitcoin's broken. A lot of people think it has slow transactions. I don't think that matters. I don't think people will ever be buying their coffees with Bitcoin. I don't think they need to. They can use something else for that. But currently, governments trade 400-ounce gold bars between each other in a vault somewhere where they don't even actually leave the vault. They just kind of put on a ledger who owns what. As long as Bitcoin's good for that kind of thing, I think it's great. And I personally think that I would think that Bitcoin's probably going to remain number one, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Ethereum overtook it.
Do you mind if I comment on that too? I also think you were speaking to use case and what it's for. So it's a little bit like comparing when you get into the issue of what's the market cap of this asset. We've just lumped every single digital asset into crypto and then assigned numbers to how much money is floating around in this particular, but you don't really look at the stock of Nestle and compare it to Tesla and be like, is Tesla gonna overtake Nestle? Like they're different use cases, different companies, and I think we eventually will start thinking of the space in that context. Whereas what's vying for the sound money alternative? What's vying for the Internet of Things network that everybody uses for their smart contracts? So I think we'll start to subdivide into categories of tokenized assets down the road.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that the whole idea of looking at things from a market cap perspective, the market cap's this, I think that's, it's going to go away. What happens when some company, some public, what happens if Google decides to tokenize their stocks? Or Amazon? Amazon's a $1 trillion company. Well, suddenly, does the market cap grow by $1 trillion? 5x? No. And same with even looking at, Tether. It's like Tether is only a few $1 billion, but how is that relevant to what the market cap of crypto is? Because they're just dollars. So I think it's a useful way of looking at the size of the industry now, but I think in a year it might not anymore. As far as the halving comment, yeah, I suppose the halving's happening. Is it happening late 2020 or something like? I don't remember the month.
Like around the election.
Right. I think it might be an interesting time. Last halving, if I recall, it didn't do too much crazy stuff to the price because it would have been priced in. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like that again. Yeah, I would think so. So, but again, that I could see 2020 being a turning point, but again, I'm not sure.
I wouldn't mind jumping in on that too. Yeah, as far as the halving goes, in my mind, and we don't have a lot of history to look back at, but we do have 2 previous halvings to look at, and it seems like, there's excitement slightly before the halving, and maybe you see price bumps. That's what we saw last time beforehand, but not near the previous all-time high. We didn't see that in 2016 when the halving happened. It went up to $700 or something. But then we had a steep correction after that. And I think the reason behind that is when the halving happens, it's not like Bitcoin is suddenly way more scarce. It's a gradual effect. It just means that there's not as much new Bitcoin coming onto the market every day. And that takes a while to have effect because all of the previously existing Bitcoin is still out there and being traded. So there's still liquidity, but over time, that lack of new coin entering the market, I think that's why we see these manias a year or so after the halving. So there was a halving in 2012, 2013 was insane. There was a halving in 2016, 2017 was insane. So I think you start to see these manias starting with the Bitcoin halving because it's the #1 cryptocurrency out there currently as far as market cap goes. And then I think that starts to siphon off into other projects, and you see these manias around some of the alts and the ICOs and whatever the next version of an ICO happens to be, maybe 2021 or something, if that trend continues, but who knows?
Any other questions?
You got the new platform Alaska's coming out, and I was reading that they're going to do what's called merge mining, where they're going to take half of Bitcoin's hashing power and put it towards Elastos. Do you think that's because the people that run Bitmain know that Elastos is probably going to be one of the best platforms coming up?
I don't know anything about Elastos, so I can't comment too much.
Ron Chen from Microsoft was developing it before he left Microsoft, and it's going to be a decentralized protocol.
We'll have to look into that.
There's another question up here. Thank
Yeah, one more. You say kind of the recent downturn in Bitcoin may have been caused by the Mt. Gox trustee selling off a bunch of coin. They're saying that payouts may happen as soon as January. I guess something like 170,000 Bitcoin. How do you think that'll affect?
You mean that coming onto the market?
Yeah.
It could be catastrophic, or it could be, or it could already be priced in, and it could. Who knows? It's impossible to speculate too much on these things.
The other interesting thing, regarding the Mt. Gox thing, has to do with the laws in the bankruptcy laws in Japan. And the way it works is when there's a bankruptcy, the entity, if there's a verdict in the favor of the people that lost their money, they get paid out in the native currency of the asset based at the time of the actual misallocation of funds.
It's actually been announced that they will be distributing the Bitcoin back
To the users.
to the users. Yeah.
So
I'm
they-
actually one of them. So.
Oh, okay, so they've changed that. Okay, so the last time I heard, the law in Japan was based that they had to pay out in fiat. So yeah, I think that could have a. So are they honoring the Bitcoin value that you held at the time?
Yeah, although I think they only recovered a third of the Bitcoin.
Okay, so they are paying back.
Yeah, so I'm gonna figure how much they're paying back yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, yeah, you'll probably, I would imagine, see at least a portion of those people say, well, I dodged that bullet at least partially, and they'll be taking some profits. I can't imagine that nobody would take profits. So sure, that contributes to selling pressure. In the long term, do I think it's a big deal? Probably not. We survived it the first time. We can survive Mt. Gox the return.
I want to say something about the entire crypto community. Look, you're getting money back, you're talking about it today. If this was capitalism in America right now and someone lost something and no one would give a shit, Isn't cryptocurrency amazing? We're going back in time, money's coming forward, they're finding it, you're getting some, it's not lost. Thank God for the blockchain. Do you see this now? Do you see how neat this is? Because regular businesses never run like this. People didn't care. They don't care if someone lost or won or this or that or bankruptcy or, you know what I mean? And if it's coming in or going out. We care so much about the cryptocurrency segment and the community. And I think we're all touched by the actual value of it, the culture of it, and all the other aspects that kind of get intertwined with it. And that's why we all came out here and did this together the last couple days. And we do this every day anyway. If we didn't come here and hang together, we'd be doing it where we came from. Home, our office, wherever that was, right? Ross, get out here, please. Come on. Ross McDonald, speaking of culture, this guy put together the crypto culture magazine. Ross, thank you so much. Have a seat, please. Ross lost sleep, he got gray hair, his son failed a math test over this, and Ross brought culture to our city and our country. It was in the Financial Post and all this. And Elias has been our friend for a while now, and we've seen him go around the world and bring back stories and wonderful times. And we've got friends from out of town, and we try to bring all of you guys together for something that we saw at South by Southwest or some of the other lectures and things they do in San Francisco, and I've been to ones in LA, and so has Ben, and we want to bring this to our home in our city, and you guys have supported the idea, and you've all shown up and put in the time and the energy and the love for this, and we are so everly grateful, you guys. So give yourselves a round of applause, please. Let's go. Ross and I thought about, let's buy this and buy that and give everybody this and give everybody that, and then we thought, you know what, let's do this. Let's get a really nice place. Let's treat everybody really well. Let's take care of the food. Let's take care of all the drinks so no one has to sweat. And let's not waste money on a bunch of name tags and a bunch of other junk that nobody cares about and just tosses in the garbage. And then we thought, what do we give these guys and girls and people? Like, what kind of gifts could we give them? And we gave you guys all those Bitcoins and gold coins, and we gave you all the education and the food and the camaraderie and the networking the last couple of days, and we gave you the flag in the dirt that we all did this together, we got some sweat equity now. We had Kenny Bozak up here, my God, flew the guy in. So what did we get out of all these last 2 days? I went home last night feeling incredible, you guys, after we ate dinner together and all that. Like, I was like high on life. I felt accomplished. I felt like we actually accomplished something, that was a dream before. And I'm a passionate guy, and I think everyone in this house knows that already about me. And Ross is equally passionate. Elias is equally passionate. Ben is equally passionate. And you guys are all passionate about crypto and yourselves and your workings. So we're like-minded citizens doing wonderful things together. And I just want you guys to know that we're so happy that you supported this. And we're going to do this every quarter for you. And this is going to be our thing. So I can't wait to do more and develop more and bring more wonderful people to the stage.